Hello. In this guide, I hope to teach the basics of Chivalry medieval warfare to the newest members of its community. Although to be completely honest, I see many rank 20s who could benefit from some of the tips in here. Without further ado, let's get started. Chivalry medieval warfare is essentially a first-person slasher multiplayer experience. What you can expect from this game is a visceral and rewarding skill-based combat system, medieval carnage, and endless brutal fun, if you're prepared to dedicate the time required to learn the ropes. The first thing you should do before even considering buying this game is making sure you have a stable internet connection. A cable connection is a superior choice, since playing via Wi-Fi can cause higher latency and packet losses. Basically, Wi-Fi unlocks the hidden class of the wizard, since you teleport everywhere. Regarding latency, it's a good idea to set a filter in the server menu to under 100 ping for regular play. Of course, there are modes where people are more forgiving towards high pings, but in general, try to stay below 100. Another setting worth changing is your field of view. For a start, I'd recommend setting it at 110 and seeing how you go from there. FOVs below 90 seriously limit how much you can see, but going above 120 starts creating a fisheye effect, distorting your view. Pretty much every action in Chivalry can be rebound to a different button. For example, I prefer dodging with left Alt instead of V, and use mouse side buttons for alternative attacks. This is entirely a matter of personal preference though, so don't hesitate to experiment. If you're completely new to the game, I strongly recommend starting with the tutorial map. It gives you a decent overview of basic combat, class abilities, and siege weaponry. The Knight has the most damage resistance out of all classes, and for that reason can be a good choice for new players to start with. You can basically be a tank with an arsenal of some of the most potent weapons in the game. The downside of this class is its poor speed. Weapon range varies from short to medium. Playstyles for this class are probably the most versatile, since knights can be both very defensive with a shield and mace, and offensive with a maul or double axe. Either way, this class can take a punch, so it's the best to practice parrying with. The Vanguard has slightly less damage resistance, but has the longest weapons in the game and moderate mobility. This class rarely suits furious playstyles, being able to deal a ton of damage all around. I often see newer players favoring this class since it's generally easier to hit enemies with. However, I strongly discourage simply swinging like a maniac. Learn your exact range and use it to your advantage while not leaving yourself exposed by missing hits. Man-at-Arms, on the other hand, is the trolliest class in the game. Being a hyperactive midget, the Man-at-Arms is the only class with the ability to dodge. With high foot speed and fast attacks, you can dart in and out of combat, devouring enemies in a flurry of hits. The downside is it only takes 1 or 2 hits to kill this class, making defeated knights even angrier. As a man-at-arms, you have to use your mobility to your advantage. Don't play this class until you are very confident of your parrying abilities and have solid footwork. The Archer is probably considered the most annoying class ever to exist. If you play well, the enemy will hate you for picking off their wounded troops. If you play poorly, your team will hate you for team kills. Archers have the least damage resistance, but are fast. You can use this to your advantage as you stab a furious vanguard to death with your butter knife, laughing your head off. This class is probably the hardest to play since you're pretty much constantly near death. Melee combat is the meat of this game, so if you want to play well, you're going to have to get this down. There are 3 basic attacks in Chivalry: the stab, the swing, and the overhead. Players can also perform alternative swings and overheads by either holding the default Alt key or using mouse side buttons. Stabs are the fastest, but do the least damage. Overheads are the most damaging, but theoretically the slowest, whereas swings are a great way to hit teammates. When playing in team-based modes, I recommend becoming a scroll warrior, using primarily stabs and overheads until you learn to control your swings to avoid hitting teammates. All melee attacks have 3 phases: wind-up, release, and recovery. During wind-up, the player starts his attack and can cancel it with a feint. The next stage is release, during which damage is dealt. A combo can be started during this phase and swing manipulation implemented. Most attacks can be accelerated or decelerated. To accelerate a swing, turn into your enemy as you strike. To accelerate an overhead, crouch and look down. To decelerate attacks, do the opposite. The last stage is recovery, when your weapon returns to the default position. You're pretty much a sitting duck in this stage. Weapon changing can greatly impact your performance. If you're having a hard time, experiment with different weapons, as this can often break a streak of bad performance. Also, don't be afraid to pull out your secondary weapon. It's there for a reason. The tutorial doesn't lie when it says parrying is the most important thing you'll learn. A good parry keeps you from dying, so make sure you do it well. Follow the tip of your opponent's weapon with your camera movement, adjusting accordingly to dive hits and side stabs. Try to parry as late as possible, just before you are hit. If you parry during your opponent's wind-up, you risk being feinted. A habit that I strongly recommend defeating is panic parrying, when the player starts parrying randomly under pressure. You might hear some false advice that shields are useful for new players, but they'll end up as a crutch, delaying the learning of proper parrying. A good way of practicing parrying is going into a round of free-for-all and focusing only on blocking enemy attacks. Footwork is basically moving out of the way of your opponent's attacks and closing in for your own hits. Knowing the range of each weapon and its attack paths will enable you to avoid some attacks without even parrying. Of course, footwork also includes mobility on the battlefield and pretty much all player movement. Feinting, in essence, is cancelling your attack during wind-up. This can save you from accidentally hitting teammates or being vulnerable from a hit you know will miss. However, it can also be used offensively, by tricking your opponent into parrying. A good feint is done as late as possible and also implements body movement. To read feints, don't parry during your enemy's wind-up phase, but rather just before you think their weapon will hit. This can of course be difficult when your opponent combines feinting with dragging. Ranged combat is relatively straightforward. Shoot at enemies and avoid their projectiles. Leading your target and predicting their movement will greatly increase your chance of a successful hit. All non-archer classes have short-range projectiles available. If you want to cancel throwing one of them, press Q by default. What really sets Chivalry apart as a multiplayer experience is its team objective mode, which grants each team a set of objectives they either have to complete or defend. These can vary from pillaging a village to protecting the royal family. It is worth noting that completing objectives does grant player points. However, these do not contribute to rank advancement, since only kills and assists grant experience. Tactics for playing in team objective vary depending on the current objective. The premises of Team Deathmatch are adequately simple. Agathians versus Masons. Kill the most of the opposing team as you can. Usually, the first team to reach 60 kills wins. Unlike in Team Objective, there is no advantage to going solo in this mode, so sticking with your teammates is vital. Don't rush to your death. Know when to retreat and heal, since each death moves the other team closer to victory. Last team standing is similar to Team Deathmatch, but divided into rounds where players do not respawn. Usually, the first team to murder all of the opposing team thrice wins. Be warned, however, higher rank players tend to kill off lower ranks and then spend the rest of the round dueling each other. When entering duel mode, you will notice that the layout is quite different. Here you can challenge other players to duels, hence the name. Alternatively, you can join the pool for auto-matching. Tactics for this mode will depend entirely on player skill. There is one good piece of advice: don't take Archer. It's a dick move in duels. Free for all primarily consists of backstabbing, kill stealing, and attacking everything that moves. There are no teams here, at least not officially. However, it is not uncommon for players to team up, creating unfair advantages, though this is rarely done maliciously. Most of the time, mutual truces can be achieved. However, pay attention when choosing servers labeled as free-for-all, since this mode is also used on duel yards. These are usually modded maps with a regeneration fountain somewhere near the middle, where mostly skilled players duel each other. To challenge someone to a duel in this mode, bow at them politely. It is also helpful to press X1 for the yes voice command. This is a very skill-intensive environment. Join only if you don't mind steep challenges. Two less frequently played modes include King of the Hill, in which each team tries to take over a designated area for as long as possible, and Capture the Flag, where each team is tasked with stealing the enemy flag and bringing it back to their base. There are two official maps for Horde mode. In both, the principle is the same. A team of players is faced with waves of enemies, increasing in strength and amount. The map Horde Town consists of 3 areas, 2 of which are initially locked, and various crates for purchasing weapons, armor, ammo, and health. The currency used is the player's score, earned by killing enemies. The map Crypts, on the other hand, lets the player choose one of 4 classes. Weapon upgrades are granted automatically for kills and character upgrades for their score. To upgrade during a round, the player has to use an upgrade statue. There are also blood fountains in each room which can be used to restore health and gradually fill up by killing enemies. Hard mode enables faster enemy spawning, useful for the first 10 rounds. Also, enemies do not spawn in any given room until a player enters them, so multi-room mode can ensure that the team has a choice of which room they want to fight in. Laser Sword as a mode is pretty self-explanatory. It replaces the player's weapons with what are called laser swords due to the copyright of certain more appropriate names. Throw-in weapons are also slightly modified. Black Knight lets its players fight without any given limb or their combination. You can even lose your head and fight for another 10 seconds. This mod is mostly applied to free-for-all, team objective, and team deathmatch. Giant Slayer starts every player off at 60% of their normal size. The player's size is increased by 10% of the size of each slain enemy. Infection is a relatively new mod in Chivalry. Players release a curse at the start of each round and opt in to become the first undead, who is then tasked with murdering everyone. Weapons and armor spawn gradually throughout the round. If enough time passes between living players being killed, the curse is lifted. Another great mod is Random Dungeon. 2 teams compete by gathering artifacts while fighting off a variety of dungeon guardians. Potions, weapons, armor, and loot can be found around the map. Mercenaries mod is a more competitive-oriented mod, made to improve and balance Chivalry. Some of its changes are subtle, some more drastic. There's really no need to know specifics until you're getting into the competitive scene. Another mod aiming to revamp the combat system is War Mod, which introduces some pretty drastic changes, including weapon clashing, banners, half sorting, and a damage overhaul. Over time, you will get to know the variety of Chivalry's maps better and learn their layout. Being aware of your surroundings will help you avoid getting cornered, ambushed, stuck on obstacles, or simply falling into a pit of lava. You can use the terrain to your advantage while running away from enemies, leading them into traps or kicking off cliffs. Tactical awareness also means knowing where your teammates are and being able to alter your position accordingly. You can charge in with your team for a strong push, or serve as a distraction or even sneak right round your enemies. I strongly recommend playing without listening to music. Although it may be enjoyable, you can potentially lose out on many audio cues, such as approaching enemies, nearby arrow shots, and distant sounds of combat, giving away the enemy position. Voice commands are probably my favorite part of this game, adding depth to in-game character interaction. Press Z for tactical commands and X for personal messages. Pressing these keys twice flips the command list, meaning you can effectively use keys 1 to 5 instead of 1 to 0. You can use these as a tactical distraction as well. Also, don't forget to press C for a battle cry. Doing this while stationary will start health regeneration. Accidental cries can be cancelled by changing weapon. Deliberate team killing is simply unacceptable, but accidents do happen. However, there are a few things you can do to minimize team kills. First of all, learn to recognize your teammates. With a variety of skins available to players, the safest way to recognize which team someone is on is by looking at the color of their name. Agathians are displayed in blue, and Masons in red. Try not to swing blindly when around teammates. Overheads and stabs are usually a safer choice. If you're quick, you can also cancel an attack before you release it into your unsuspecting mates. Still, when you do end up killing a teammate, always type sorry or sir for the sake of politeness. The in-game stats of weapons can be pretty misleading. A much more accurate list of all weapon statistics can be found in an online data spreadsheet. You can find the link to it in the description. I remember what it was like starting out and joining normal servers after hitting rank 16. Higher rank players simply destroy newbies. Also, many veteran players are friends and will often avoid killing each other, so don't be surprised if this happens. However, most experienced players are willing to give tips and advice. The last topic I'd like to cover is the vote kick system. Do not abuse it. There are 4 reasons that you should kick someone for: deliberate team killing, ridiculously high ping, being constantly idle on a full server, and cancerous behavior. By the last, I mean genuinely malicious shit-talking that no one wants to see, although it's best to simply ignore such individuals. The vote kick system does not exist to kick players who are playing too skillfully for you to handle. Also, 100% team damage votes at the very start of the round should often be ignored, since this can be caused by as little as 1 light kick to a teammate who hasn't hit an enemy yet. If you have reached this point, I'd like to congratulate you for your above average attention span. Ending the video, I'd like to thank the people who gave me their time and advice while creating this vast guide. Thank you Cryptos, Nebu, Fungus Among Us, and Pablo. Your help is much appreciated. If I missed anything out or misled you in some way, please let me know in the comments. Goodbye and see you in game.
Thanks.